Welcome to Feel Seen Space. We are a digital platform designed for artists and creatives who yearn for more. At a time of massive change, what does it mean to create? What role does artistic expression serve for the individual and the collective? On this podcast, we try to answer these questions by interviewing artists on their holistic creative processes, their work, and their personal journey. Today we're welcoming French author Clément Bénech. Clément is a brilliant author who has published 4 novels at Flammarion and a literary essay for which he won a prize at the Institut de France. His passion for words led him to explore many other outlets, from ghostwriting to social media, all the way to stand-up comedy. Now Clément is literally family for me, as he is my brother-in-law, but today even I discovered some new stories about him, as we explored how he started out as a really young novelist, and how he navigates the commercial and artistic aspects of his work. He also talks about the importance of community, and how he thinks that our relationship with words and literature are going to evolve in the current culture. This is a fascinating conversation on art, culture, craft, and on the importance of following your own inner compass. Enjoy. Hi, Clément. How are you?
Hi, Roxanne. I'm fine. How are you?
Good. So we're so happy to have you on the podcast today. Where are you in the world right now?
I'm near Paris at my place. So it's in the south of Paris, in the suburbs.
Nice.
Not so far from where I was born, like 2 kilometers away.
Okay. And are you working on any special projects right now that you can share with us?
Yeah. So I'm working on different projects. For a few years, I have not been employed in a company, but I've been freelance for 2 or 3 years. So I have different projects. These are proofreading, ghostwriting, and translating a bit from German.
Okay.
Children's books. But the main thing that I try to do is writing books, writing novels. And I'm trying to find some time to do it at the moment. But this year has been more lucrative and less creative, more proofreading. I've been ghostwriting a book for the biggest part of the year, like for the 6 last months. The book is finished. And I'm trying to start a new project now with the brand Louis Vuitton, because they have this édition Louis Vuitton. So they do great books. In French, we call it beaux livres, so coffee table books. It's another project for me, but I think it's gonna leave me more time to work on my own book.
Amazing. You started your career pretty early. You were pretty young when you wrote your first novel. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your background and your upbringing. Did you know early on that you would write books and that would be your career path?
No, not at all. No, actually, I didn't know it until I was like 18. Even though when I was 18, I didn't know that I would one day be able to publish, because that's one thing to know that you want to write. It's another to be published. But as a kid, I wanted to draw. I thought I wanted to be an illustrator, but I was not as good as drawing as I thought, because as someone told me one day, everyone draws, and then sometime you meet someone who tells you that it's not so good. For example, if you go to an art school and you think you're good at drawing, suddenly everyone's good at it, and you're not so good. And I realized when I was a teenager that I wasn't so good, but I still enjoyed it. So I used to draw little comics.
Okay.
Instead of taking notes in class, I would rather draw on a paper little comic characters. I already wanted to tell some stories with the help of the drawings and the illustrations. But then afterwards, I realized that the drawings were not essential to my stories. So I think that happened at the end of my high school. This is the moment where I started writing my first novel. So after the baccalaureate, when I was 17, And at that time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do as an adult, but I knew that I wanted to create something, and probably in the writing field. So after this high school graduation, I wrote like one novel each year until my first novel was published. So in France, you would just call it first novel because it's the first published. But for me, it was the fourth that I've been writing.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, well, I'm actually glad that the first three ones were not published because they're not good at all. So all you can do afterwards is just thank the editors who said no. But yeah, that's the story.
And did you grow up in a creative family?
So I wouldn't say that. I grew up in a rather wealthy family in Paris with, I'd say, no inclination towards creativity, but it was a family where culture and literature, cinema, theater had a place, had an importance. So this is what I'm really thankful for because I was always surrounded with books. I had a grandmother, she's still alive. She worked when I was a kid for a children's books publisher, very known in France, which is called Bayard. And they do periodic children's books that you receive in your letterbox every month. So I could read that as a kid and enjoy it. And it gave me the taste of literature, reading, and stories. It's funny because as a young adult, when I was wondering what I wanted to do for a living, the first thing that crossed my mind was working in children's books because I felt thankful for these publications and thought that it would be a good thing to sort of recreate or continue what I had as a kid and this tradition of children's books.
Interesting. You also come from a family of career coach.
Mhm.
Did you have the help from your parents guiding you down this writing path, or were they super open for you to achieve anything, basically?
Well, it is true that my parents now both are coaches at some level, but it wasn't always true. It's mostly something they did at the end of their career. When I was a kid, they were not really in that field, but they already had that probably in them. I don't think they really supported it as I had my high school graduation because literature, everything that comes with it, it's like art. It doesn't make your parents really safe when it comes to like orientation of your kid and like a plan of a career. So I think my parents were rather worried when I told them that I wanted to study literature at the Sorbonne, which is what I ended up doing eventually. But at first, I mean, I can understand what they felt because I was not a very good student as a teenager. My marks were not really good. So even in French and in literature, I was not really good at it. So I can understand that for them, it seemed like a long shot to go study literature. So I think they wanted me to do something safer, something more generic. So they sort of pushed me to go to business school because people tend to say that it's very generic and afterwards you can do anything. But so I started preparing for it, but I stopped in the process to go to this university and study not only literature but German as well.
Okay.
So I did for 2 years German studies, and it's one of the most interesting moments in my life, I'd say.
And at school, did you have a mentor that gives you the strength to pursue fully this career? As you said, it wasn't the safest path for you. So I'm just curious to understand if you met people or a mentor that really give you the push.
Mentor, I wouldn't say, but I did have some friends that, pushed me into this idea of doing something creative. As a kid, I had a friend, he's still a good friend of mine, named François, and we met when we were 5. And he was an amazing illustrator. His mom was a painter, and he really was gifted for it. And he gave me the desire to tell stories and to put them into a form. So yeah, that's the closest I had to a mentor as a kid. And afterwards, when I went to university, I met other friends who wanted to write also, or write for the cinema, or maybe do some music. I have a good friend who went to a jazz school, and all this creativity reinforced my desire to write myself. So yes, afterwards, as I was in university, I tried to find some mentors. This is true. I wanted to have my text read by people that I respected, that I admired. So I did start to show what I was writing. So from 17 to 21, which is the moment I published my first novel, I wrote a lot. So I wrote 4 novels. I wrote a theater piece. I wrote short stories. I had a blog. I wrote tweets. And I wanted to be read, which I think is normal when you're creative and you want people to see what you're doing. So sometimes I used to show my texts to professors at university that I thought maybe would be interested, which is complicated. What is complicated is that when you study literature in France, even though it's beginning to change a bit, but when you study literature, it's not creative writing. It's knowledge. It's like literary knowledge, and not writing, which is two totally different things.
So it's more the theory than the practice.
Theory, history of literature, compared literature, linguistics, history of language, ancient French, grammar, all these things that I've been really curious about, but which weren't really what I was into. So that part was like a sort of secret, even though I did mention it to people, but it was not really the center of what I was doing in this university.
And you have an amazing group of friends. Most of them are writers. Do you feel you found your community? Do you uplift each other? Do you feel this sense of comparison? How do you work together?
Yeah, I have good friends that are writers as well. One of them is François-Henri Désérable, so he's a very famous writer in France. Actually, we started together because like 1 or 2 years before my first novel, I think we met through Facebook because he read something that I wrote maybe on my blog, and then we became friends. And our first books were published the same week in 2013, and then we were invited to some radio or TV shows together. Well, I think it's a good thing to have a good community of writers around you, because I've always felt better when surrounded by people that like bring me higher and push me to become better. But it's something that I've had for a long time, that I want to be with people that work more, that go beyond what I'm capable of.
Amazing. It's great when you find these people, right, that push you to be the best version of yourself. Did you face any situation in your field that were maybe a bit toxic or where you felt not seen?
It's not that easy because I don't really recall toxic situations, but I think it's maybe because I've tried in my professional life to avoid these situations. I don't really like conflict. So when I started working, I worked in children's books. And when you write in children's books, even though it's capitalism and lucrative, you do spend your day thinking about pink elephants and stories of little animals having trouble. And for some reason, it's an environment that was good for me. I didn't feel threatened in that environment. But it did happen to me that I had problems in my literary life, but I don't really recall. I do recall one thing. So I was 19 and I was writing my second novel. I actually just finished writing it. So just a few friends of mine have read it. And I had a friend in university who told me my husband, he works for a publishing house. So it's a thing that would happen to me every week at this time. Like I would always listen to people when they would talk about this world of publishing that I didn't know anything about because my family had nothing to do with this world. So every time someone would tell me about it, I would be interested. So she told me, give me your manuscript and I'll give it to my husband. So I did that. And a few days afterwards, I received a phone call. And actually, it was not the husband who had read it, but his colleague. And this person was really rude to me. Like, he said that the manuscript was not good and that the sentences made no sense. So I recall that I was really... I wasn't shocked. I was like really curious about what he wanted to say to me. And so I replied saying, do I need to start again to rewrite everything? And he said, no, you'd better just stop writing.
Wow. Okay.
So I was 19 and it kind of shocked me that you could say that. But my desire was too strong to just... listen to such a piece of advice.
And now you are a successful published author, which is kind of nice to go back to this person and say, hey, remember when you told me this?
Well, I think it's a matter of taste, and probably he wouldn't like my books today either. I mean, it's still a weird thing to say to a young person that wants
Absolutely.
to start in a field. But generally, people tend to say that the literary milieu field is really harsh towards young writers. I didn't think so, except for that very short story. Afterwards, I tried stand-up comedy in Paris for a few years. And this field, I think, is harder. Like, people tend to be less friendly towards one another than what I've seen in the literary milieu.
And what advice would you give a young writer or someone that wants to pursue that career?
I think if you want to write, it's really simple to say, but first you need to read a lot of things. A lot, but you also have to know very well a few authors that you love. Not read everything, but read carefully different authors that you know very good, like 3 or 4 authors. Know how they write, know how they build their stories and their sentences, and that I think is the most important thing. And of course, not listening to people who tell you to stop writing when you're 19, because it's just bullshit.
Love that.
Do you ever lose track on your creative projects? Maybe you're a professional artist or creative, but what used to be your passion now feels uninspiring. Or maybe you decided to pursue a safer career path, but you just know you have that artistic side of you that's dying to come out. At Feel Seen Space, our mission is to get you back in touch with your creativity, your flow, and your purpose. If you're ready to feel seen, we offer one-on-one holistic mentoring sessions designed to reconnect you to your inner artist. You'll find all the information at the link in the show notes. We hope to see you soon. So, Clément, you mentioned earlier in the interview that when you were still young, still in high school, you were not so great in French, which is really hard for me to believe. So when did it start for you, that thirst for knowledge and to really read voraciously like you currently do?
I can tell precisely when that was because I think when I was like 18, so I entered the Sorbonne in literature, and for some reason I felt that I had lost so much time because in high school I was in the section science, and my baccalaureate was scientific, and for some reason, in a sort of phantasmatic thought, I was persuaded that everyone around me was really cultivated or full of knowledge, notably about literature. I was sure that everyone would write better because they knew literature more than I did. And so for these years that were probably the richest in terms of knowledge in my life, like from 17 to 21 or 22, I read everything that I could in a sort of obsessional manner, reading from A to Z in the library of the Sorbonne, everything that I thought was worth knowing, because I was really sure that one cannot write if one hasn't read all the classics, which I know today is not true, but I needed this sort of reassuring for myself.
So you started, from what I understand, mostly out of feeling like you were not enough as is, rather than having a real interest for these pieces, because I mean French literature is so vast and intimidating. If you want to read all the classics, that takes a lot of time, so you have to actually enjoy the experience as well, I guess.
Yeah, well, of course, I did not read everything, but I started with the most important and the things that I felt I had to read. You know, there's this, in French even we say must read, but most of them are must have read. Like it's a bit different. But no, I did enjoy it actually. I loved it. I loved reading. It's a thing that I had as a kid, and I kept it in my life. Even though as a teenager I read less because basketball entered my life, and it was suddenly way more interesting for like 5 years, and then I rediscovered reading and literature.
Amazing. And so later on, as you said, you started your career in children's book, and it's so specific compared to, well, adult books. So I was curious, in your opinion, what makes a great book for kids?
A great book for kids is a book that is so evident, like it feels it's always been there. And when you receive it, because I've had this particular experience of receiving as a young editor a book that will be published, you receive it and you feel like it's evident. You feel like it's always been there. But I know it doesn't help. It doesn't help a young illustrator or writer to just tell him, do something evident. I know.
So you yourself don't write much for kids, but I know you have written short, tiny stories for kids on the French radio, for example. And I was curious, how does that process start? Because in children's book, from my understanding, there's a very strong message. Yeah, you want the kid to learn something as well. So when you start writing this story, do you start with the message and the conclusion, or do you have this instinct for like a character or an animal that's gonna have some adventures?
It's a really tough one, because the one time that I wrote for children, I thought it was so difficult. And it took me like 3 months to write this 10-minute story.
It's a great one.
Thank you. I think it's very difficult because what I discovered as an editor for children's books is that the people who write for children, they do that naturally. They don't have like to switch something in their head to think like, now it's time to write for children. Which for me was totally the case because I'm used to write. I don't know. I don't write for adults, but it's just it's just natural to me to speak to someone who has the same understanding as me, the same brain, the same relationship to reality. So part of the reasons why I went to this field, to children's books, is because I was fascinated by this world and I didn't feel like I could write these kind of stories. So I felt more comfortable with being on the side of the editor. Plus, I felt like I was a failed illustrator and a drawer. So I always found fascinating the people who are good at drawing, and I enjoyed receiving the illustrators when they came to our office, because I'd say out of 10 illustrators we were working with, maybe 2 or 3 of them were still working the old way and not with
Not digitally.
not digitally. So I loved that.
You're starting to tell us a bit about what it is to be an editor on one hand and a writer on the other one, an author. Because I know that you now do both, and the books that you now work on as an editor aren't for kids anymore. They're literature for adults. So how is that for you to work on both sides of the same coin? Is it strange, and how do these jobs feed one another, and how is it sometimes harder to switch from one side to the next?
It's not so easy to explain to our viewers, but I work in the edition field, but I'm not like the editor of anyone. I'm like freelance and I work on books as a proofreader, as a reviewer, as a consultant, you could
Okay.
say that. Um, but for no one, I'm the person who impersonates the edition, the publishing house. I think that's easier for me. I don't know if I could be the editor of someone. I think it asks a lot of modesty. I know few people who do that. It's a tough position because sometimes these people, so they are editors, they write, and you would say in the same month they will publish their own book and the books they've been working on for the others, and that I think is difficult. For my part, the books that I work on, sometimes I like them, sometimes I don't, but there is no emotional attachment to it. Of course, when they do good, I'm happy for them, but yeah, there's a separation.
You're less invested than a regular, let's say, editor
Yeah.
would, right? Because from what we gathered from our friends who do this job, it seems like you're very, very involved in the art, the writing, but also the emotional aspects of creation.
Of course.
That's a big part of the job. How is your relationship with your editor on that end?
Well, my editor, she's a woman. I've known her for 12 years. She's a very smart woman. She's very good with fiction. Really, she has a sense for fiction. She's my first reader. I trust what she's gonna say and feel about a book. Even when I don't agree with her solutions, I always respect the feelings. I always respect the intuition that, for example, a character doesn't work, or that this scene should be longer or should be cut. It's really fascinating. It's a really different. As an editor, I work on non-fiction mostly.
Okay.
It's really different to work on fiction, and how does a story work. I think it's a fascinating process. People tend to not know it very well. They don't know what an editor does, but I think it's a fascinating work. It's like you have a gallery and you show your taste with the artists that you select in your gallery, and an editor has authors, and you can see a character of the person by the books one or this person chooses to publish. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that you've also been sometimes teaching creative writing for small groups of adult amateurs. And I always wondered how that works, because how much of it is a skill that you hone and how much of it is like an inspiration that you're just born with.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was saying earlier that in France, when I was a student back then, like 10 years ago, we didn't have the creative writing masters and degrees, which is now changing because I think there are at least 3 or 4 major creative writing degrees now in France. Notably one in Le Havre, which is pretty famous because people that obtained this degree afterwards got published in great publishing houses. So that's how it went famous. For me, I don't really have an opinion on it. When I was asked to do it, I tried to do it as good as I could. I do think that writing is a craft. A part of it can be taught, even though I think the most important cannot, because the most important thing in your book is what only you can bring to it. But I think there are some good principles that I've tried to teach what I understand from these principles, even though I do know that what works for me could also not work for someone else. There is no such thing as good writing. We live in a time where a lot of different types of good writing exist. So all you can do is give general principles, and then you can just hope that the student will be cherry picking what's good for him. And for me, as a young writer, I do think that some principles from the writers that I admire were useful to me. A phrase that I've heard, a sentence that I've read, that I recall at some moment when I'm writing something, that can at some point do a little difference and help. But I do think that the most important is to write a lot and also to try to imitate at first the people that you admire. You know, I'm really inspired by the fact that painters, for example, in the 19th century, they used to go to the Louvre and they try to copy the masterpieces of their art. It's something that we don't think is true in literature, but I think we should consider it. When you start to write, try to deliberately copy who you admire, and something personal will come out of it eventually.
Interesting. And you yourself, because your daily work is so different from one day to the next, how do you keep sort of a creative hygiene, or do you keep on writing without a purpose, or do you always write with an end goal in mind?
For me, that's two different questions, because I honestly don't have a hygiene in writing. I wish I had. But it's always fascinating to me to see that for every book that I've done, I've had new problems. I think things were also easier for some part, but I've had new problems. And for the last book that I wrote, my problem was to find a tone, and maybe I will have another problem for the next one. But now I'm trying to find some time for myself to write, and this is something that I'm working on because I don't have like a routine.
Okay.
This is something that I would like to work on maybe next year, because this year the work part has been very important, and the writing part has been less important, which I regret.
But then how do you stay inspired? You constantly read new things, or not so much?
Yeah, I read, but I wouldn't say that the inspiration comes from the reading.
Okay.
I think it can become something literary if it's not literature at first. So I'm more into the stories that people tell me, or a dream, or an idea that will just come up in the middle of the day. And this inspiration, I'd say, comes from the inside rather than the outside. And the project I'm working on at the moment is a collection of short biographies of different people, real people that have lived or that are still living. And this project is somehow, it's a peculiar project. It's not very easy to explain. And I know that it won't be easy to sell. It's not like a novel that you can explain in like one time. But I want to be faithful to the feeling that I have in me that I want to tell these stories. And that's why I say that it comes from the inside, because I really feel something that brings me to these stories, even though you can say that the book won't sell or something.
That's good. You're following your inner compass.
Yeah.
You also wrote an essay a couple of years back for which you won a prize, I remember. And that essay was about the relationship between literature and images.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, in this day and age, images are so important. How do you feel like it changes the way that we interact with words and with literature?
I think we will always need words, because words and images have a very different structure. Words have been created to create a link between people, to communicate. It's their purpose, it's their essence. Whereas the essence of images is not intrinsically related to communication, because the myth of the birth of images, the first image, we say that it's someone who tried to draw a shadow on a wall, but it's more like to save something, like the essence of the image. Whereas, the word is communication, it's community, and I think we're gonna need it more and more. But when I wrote this essay, my point was really, it was not like metaphysical. It was more about literature and what we can do in literature with the images. And notably, I wanted to acknowledge the fact that the images are so present in our life, and just to say, maybe if we let them enter a little bit, open the door in our fictions, we can do something new in literature, and something that resonates more with our time. Mm-hmm. That was my point.
And I'm also curious about what you think still in the evolution of our relationship to words and literature. I feel like the oral aspects of words, or like spoken words, are becoming more and more important compared to written words. Do you feel like this is true? And do you feel like this also changes how people write?
Yeah, it's true. There's this French intellectual that I really like named Régis Debray, and he wrote about medium, and communication a lot. I don't know how to say it in English, but he invented the notion of graphosphere. So he was saying that we've been living in a graphosphere for centuries. So an environment where the writing was like the most important way of communicating. And now we are living in a videosphere, like it's the most...
Video.
Voilà. It's the main way of communicating. So yeah, I do think we've been living through a change that is at an anthropological level, like is big. But as you're saying very well, I think that people will tend, the more we live through videos, the more we will tend to have actual human meetings and interactions, which means oral discussions as well. But it's funny, because I've had this idea recently that with AI, the text, I mean, in my world of literature, the text will tend to be less important, because you've always have this doubt that a text from now on has been written in AI.
That's what happened to Roxanne when she wrote her poem, her Phil scene. Everyone's first response was like, "Oh yeah, did you use ChatGPT?" And it was like, "Oh,
that is rude. That is rude and not true." But yeah, I think people will tend to to go back to oral literature, which has been actually mainly literature for the last centuries or millennia. So I think we're probably going back to something where we will look for humanity in oral interventions.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about AI because, as you said, before reading a text, there was a certain like deference to it. You were like, okay, someone took a lot of time and energy to put into this text, and now it feels like it's just like creating text by the minute everywhere in the world, and editing and proofreading. So, what part of that job do you feel is irreplaceable and really takes a human to do that properly?
This is a tough one because it's really my answer is in October 25, but
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe in 1 year it will sound so naive because the evolution is so quick. But I think there are a lot of things that cannot be understood by an AI yet when I read a text, because when I proofread, it's not only grammar. For example, you have always this question of, is your story believable? And that is a complex alchemy. That is something really hard to tell, I think, if you're a machine.
Yep.
Because it depends of so much factors that are not mathematical. Because when you read a book, you don't read about literature, it's about the real world. So a lot of things that are in the book actually are related to the experience of living. And you can tell, for example, that this person would not do such a thing considering her background, considering her humor. And I don't think yet that an AI could do this. And this is one example, but I think there are a few more.
And I would argue that on top of the logical side of what you're describing, there's also something very emotional about an artwork, which ultimately is about, you know, diving deep into the vision of another human being. And that's what's interesting. And I doubt that that can ever be replaced. Again, maybe I'm naive too, but that's what I feel.
Yeah, I don't think this has been done yet. That the machine can actually create something that is really new, and by really new I mean something like surrealism, for example, like artistic movement that is really important to me, because the emergence of such a movement is not written in history. It's not like the logical development of history of literature.
Disruption.
It's really disruption. It comes from different brains that at some point had curious ideas that converged, but you cannot make this up,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
But after our conversation, I will go to ChatGPT and ask him to create 10 new art movements for our century, and I'll see.
Okay. I'm curious about that. So, speaking about surrealism and different artistic movements, is there one in particular or different artist that inspires you?
Yeah, I've been inspired by different authors. André Breton in surrealism is a really major inspiration for me, even though I wouldn't say it's still the case today, but when I was 20, I was really fond of him and everything he was writing. I love Patrick Modiano, who got the Nobel Prize. I love a writer that is named Éric Chevillard. It's translated to English, so I can say it. I love a Belgian writer called Jean-Philippe Toussaint. These are writers that I discovered when I was 18 or 20, and I instantly loved what they wrote and wanted to read everything from them. As a kid, I loved Roald Dahl and J.K. Rowling, of course. Later, Kundera was really important to me. A German writer called Siebold. And I must say that I love Donna Tartt as well.
So, you said that this author was really important to you. How does that translate? Did you ever have a book that changed your life or made you see situations in a new way? How do they make you change?
Writers have been for me like older brothers that I did not have. It's like they allow you to go further, or they enlarge your vision of what you can do, that you're authorized to do as a writer. I recall when I read the first book of Jean-Philippe Toussaint that he wrote when he was 28 years old. So it's called La Salle de Bain, so the bathroom, I guess. I'm pretty sure it's translated to English. It's a really short book about a guy. It starts with the main character in his bath. And he doesn't want to get away. He doesn't want to stand up and do something. And it starts like this, and then he goes to Venezia, and then he plays tennis. And at first it looks like just a short story. But this book made a huge impression on me because it's like the equivalent in a novel of a Japanese wood print, you see? Like it's very quiet. It feels like you could just slip into this story and live in this quiet and strange environment. And the way he told that story with short paragraphs numbered, that made a huge impression on me and really changed my way of writing. I can also say that when I first read Modiano, so I was 17, he made me understand what Paris was, because I was living in Paris, but I didn't see it. And I had to go through the lens of this amazing writer to understand the city. And suddenly it became amazing.
So cool. But so these guys, Jean-Philippe Toussaint and Modiano, they're quite older than you. So for your generation of writers, you had to write in the age of social media. And you mentioned being quite active on Twitter. I know you met quite a few friends there. You even met your wife, my sister, on Twitter. But so what is your relationship like today with social media? Is it like everyone else, like a love-hate relationship? How do you handle it?
Love-hate, yes. I've always used it, no, not always, but when I started writing, I started using social media as a creative tool. And it's the hygiene that I'm trying to have on the social media. And if I feel like I'm just consuming something and not creating, then I would definitely hit the hate button. But for Twitter, I loved Twitter. I used to love it. Now, not really anymore. But it was a way of... I loved to write short sentences and to get a reaction. But of course, it can be an illusion because it gives you like a short shot of dopamine. Like, whereas when you write a novel, you have a good idea. You're like, I'm going to write it. It's going to be good. But people are not going to read it before like 2 or 3 years. Whereas when you're on Twitter, you write your little joke, your little sentence, and then you feel like it's gonna be read in a short time. So you also have to resist that urge. Now I think I resist more. Also, I think that I have less ideas, or I am more critical towards them. I think it's the second option.
That's also about getting older and being less impulsive than when you're 20. Yeah.
But just to finish on social media, now I use Instagram. At first, I didn't know why I was using it. And now I'm trying to use it as a creation tool to write because, of course, I'm trying to go in the direction of the algorithm because now I post reels. But actually, the video is more a pretext because it's mostly to share an idea or a short sentence, like aphorism or a little joke or something. But it must be written. If it's not, I consider that I'm falling in the trap of the algorithm.
And since writing a novel, it's such like a personal thing to do, and as you said, social media, you have that instant feedback. Do you feel or have you experienced that the reaction sometimes makes you change your strategy or change your voice and you try to adapt to what the algorithm or the people like, or are you very faithful to your vision?
I'm trying to be faithful to my vision. I'm just thinking about the reader, as I've always done when writing. I'm thinking about the other parts, because creation is not only a thing you do in your little room, and plus is what I was saying earlier about language and words. It's in their essence to be shared, and you have to have someone on the other side. So I cannot forget that. And that's why I adapt on social medias to have with these little videos. I think that I can touch more people. And yeah, when you create, you want to be seen.
So how do you want your books and reels, and I know that you're working on other new forms of art, how do you want your work to feel to the reader?
That's something that I really cannot control. I'd rather, it's like in life, you don't know how people are gonna perceive you, so the best thing to do is just to act normal, or the normalest you can.
As much as possible.
Yeah, because, I mean, you can try to calculate the impact, but it's so difficult, and there are so much things that you cannot control. So you'd better just do your thing the most sincerely you can. Mm-hmm. It's what I think. It's what I tried to do, because when I wrote this little essay about photography in literature, I just had this urge to do it, like inner urge to do it. Even though I knew that it would only interest like 400 people maybe, which was the case. Like, I think the book sold 400 copies. But I had this literary prize at the Académie Française, which is the only literary prize that I got now, yet. And it was like 1 year after the book was published. So it made me realize that I had to do it. And I'm glad that I stayed faithful to what I wanted to do, because eventually I was right to do it.
Absolutely. Those are beautiful parting words, I think. Thank you so much, Clément.
Thank you. To you too.
That's it for today's episode. We thank our guests for their trust, and we thank you for being a part of our community. If you like this episode and want to support our work, consider ranking our podcast on Apple or Spotify. And if you know someone who could benefit from this conversation, please share our work with them to help them spread the dream of a conscious, creative community. Talk soon.